Live. And it says the hangout is now live. So I want to welcome everyone to my YouTube channel and page. I really don't have an official name for these talks. So one day I'll figure out a name for it, and then I can introduce it as, under that banner. But my name is Asar Hotep, for those who don't know, and I'm sitting here with an esteemed panel of individuals who I've gotten to know over the years, who are actively engaged in the study of the ancient Egyptian writing scripts known by various names, the most popular being Medu Neter. And I just wanted to have a kind of a formal, informal conversation, with individuals about the script, about their introduction into the script, what they've learned over the years about the language and the culture through the script, and some practical applications for the study of the script amongst African Americans and just Africans in general. So I would like to welcome my panel. I will let each of y'all introduce yourselves, and we're expecting two more to come later. And so when they come in, if they come in, then we'll introduce them at that time. But I'll start off with Brother Bonacci. You there?
Yes, I'm here. My name is Akinjide Bonacci Montgomery. I'm a resident of Detroit, Michigan. I've been a studier of African philosophy and culture, I guess, since 1976, when I took my first Dr. Ben's class. I've been studying the Medu Neter as a script since 1987 from Dr. Kemetic and Dr. Obeni.
All right.
So introduction.
I'd like to welcome you to the panel, and for your upcoming insights. Thank you very much for joining us. Next, we have Brother Divine. You there, good brother?
Uncle Jocelyn, life, prosperity, and health. Ren F, my name. Ren E, my name is Divine Ruler Equality of Law. I am in the nation of gods and earths. It's commonly known as 5% Nation or 5%ers. And I've been an advocate of Black cultural expression in this realm since the late 80s. I've been in the nation since 1991. Because of my involvement in that, we are encouraged to study Black classical civilization, which the best example that we have in my perspective is the civilization that is exposed in Tamari or Kemet, or which is commonly called ancient Egypt. And I formally started studying the Medu Neter under Seba Bonochi Montgomery a few years ago. It was 2009, 2010. And also under Sabat Riketi Amen. And they both study under Theophil Benga, and to some extent Shamsu Jedi Haru, Jedi Carruthers, Mahakaru. So my interest there is learning the language to expose the high ideas of civilization that Black people espoused and lived by and practiced through antiquity, even up until today, and how they've continued until today. Fair. Thank you. Dua. Thank you.
Peace, peace. Next up, we have Brother Uja.
Yeah, my name is Wujau Meneb Edi Ma'at, and I'm also a resident of Atlanta. Actually, I'm in Conyers, but we always just say Atlanta. Well, I got involved in the study of Medu Neter as a result of just the idea. I did an in-depth study of the Abrahamic religions, and in that, you know, I was always taught and learned that in order to understand the culture of a people, you have to understand the language, especially the language that their records that they left behind, in order to get into the minds of the people and to understand and get a better, accurate assessment of the culture and what they left behind. So in doing that with Abrahamic religions, it seemed like all the paths and all the concepts and all the philosophy of the Abrahamic religions trace back to Africa as a whole, and then also into Kemet, ancient Egypt. So I took the same logic and utilized the same logic and decided to learn the language in order to let the ancestors speak. You know, we have a lot of different sayings, and one of them is, you know, let the ancestors speak. Well, in order for them to speak, you have to understand their language. You have to understand what they recorded and left behind. So that was my motivation for learning the language, and I became a student of Dr. Raketi Amen, and took her classes, excellent classes. She's an excellent teacher, very patient,
Yes.
excellent work, very, very patient. You know, I would say she's the pretty most patient person I've ever met.
I would agree with
um,
that.
so I've taken her classes, and then from there, you know, I've taught myself and did some studying, and also with Medu Neter, if you know, in my path, I've also taken an interest in linguistics in general because, you know, they say Medu Neter is a so-called dead language, but it survives in its related siblings in the living languages today. In order to crack that, we have to get into linguistics. So I took an interest there as well. So that's pretty much how I got into it. I've been studying it ever since. And also, I'm in the process of writing a beginner's book because I also taken what I've learned.
Hold on, hold on one second. Everyone else, are y'all hearing feedback from him?
To you, yes.
I'm not getting feedback, but he's fading in and out.
Okay. I'm getting like reverb, like one of us has a volume up too high.
Yeah, somebody
Maybe somebody.
their speakers or their mic or something like that.
And I'm using webcam.
Yeah, I'm using a webcam as well. Well, you know, hopefully we'll figure it out. But continue with Roger.
Okay, I think maybe I guess we can mute our mics one by one and find out which one was wanted.
Okay. I'm gonna mute my mic. Oop. Press the wrong button. Mute my mic.
All right.
Okay, I still hear you.
Yes, it's not you.
Okay. Brother Divine, mute your mic.
Okay.
Testing. Nope. Maybe you, Brother Bernacci.
Okay, I'm doing mine.
All right, testing.
Yeah.
That seems to be it.
All right.
Yeah. It's Brother Bonacci's.
It's me.
Like,
It's me.
it's
Is my mic?
It seems like
Either turn down or either turn down the mic or turn down the speakers on it. Not by holding.
Okay, let me see about to turn on the speaker line. Does that help any?
Yeah, and to you, indeed. Can you hear us?
Yeah.
that helped.
Can you hear us?
I can't hear you. No.
Okay, well, yeah, we'll have to deal with it. Because we want
Or
to hear each other.
you can maybe mute your mic until you're ready to speak. You know, either way. Try to unmute it as you want to speak.
Yeah, that's what it's gonna.
Okay, say that again. What do you need?
I was saying that maybe you may be able to mute your mic until you want to speak. You can unmute.
Okay. Okay, I got you.
Okay, testing, still echoing. No.
No echo.
Okay. Now I've gotten a correspondence from Sanjetti he says that he's on and he sees three people, but he's not conjoined to anything, and so I don't understand what's going on.
Maybe he
with
needs
his.
to add us to circles.
He needs to what?
Add us to circles if he hasn't already. Or we add him back.
Well, if he clicks on the link, he should come straight in.
Okay.
Yeah, but even without being added to the circle.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask a question and then I'm gonna continue to work to see if we can get him on. But so just I guess I'll start off with Brother Bonacci. I know you mentioned that you got introduced from one of Dr. Ben's classes from back in the day, but what was it about the Medu Neter script that compelled you to learn more about it, and what has kept you engaging in this process for all these years?
The Medu Neter script specifically, well, I have read a great deal about Kemetic. I came really from a metaphysical background, and so I had just read a lot of different authors about Kemetic, and everybody was saying a lot of different things. And I wanted to know, what means could I use to judge the veracity of what was said. And it became obvious that anyone who opinion I respected was because they could read the Medu Neter language. So it became obvious that instead of taking everybody else's word for what the language said, I need to learn how to read the language myself. The first time I attempted, myself and two other friends picked up Gardner's book, and this was in 1981 after my first trip to Kemetic, and it was just too difficult. That book was very hard to understand, and it was 5 years after that, in 1987, that I met Sister Kemetic Jones on a trip to Kemetic as a member of our ASCAC, and through her, she really introduced us to, I guess you could say, a professional or scholarly manner in which you could actually learn this language. And it was through her and the Roosevelt Roberts from Chicago, who initially gave us our start in learning this language. And after that, really, this language is very difficult to learn, especially for someone who doesn't have a background in languages or have a scholarly background. So what we found was that it took us about 5 years, really, just to get an understanding of a methodology to learn the language. And after that, really, it was kind of we also studied Yoruba and advanced mathematics, and we find that there was a connection between all of these three things: the Medu Neter language, and also in terms of advanced mathematics, the rigor in learning advanced algebra proved to be very important in terms of learning the Medu Neter language. We studied Yoruba, and we became initiates in the Yoruba, and a lot of the ceremony in Yoruba allowed us to see a lot of the so-called spiritual aspects of the Medu Neter language also, because something that Uja said earlier, and that is there's a connection between the, all of the cultures of the African continent. So hopefully that answers your question.
All right.
Peace. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Now we can.
Okay. For some reason, the application on the phone, I mean on the Google Hangouts, is not working, and so brother, I have brother Reggie on the line, and so I'll have him speaking through the phone. So I'm gonna come in just a little bit. If Brother Uwaju, if you could take over for a second.
Okay, no problem.
All right. I'm gonna mute my phone.
All right. Well, I guess we could take the same question that you asked Brother Benochi, and just kind of build on it. Divine Ruler, I guess you can actually take the same question and answer it, or just go from there.
All right, so more to what I spoke on earlier about how I got into the study of this. In the late 80s, early 90s, we had the pickup and resurgence in what was termed as conscious hip hop or positive hip hop. You had artists like Kim Shabazz and Rakim and poor rights teachers, the Brand Nubian and X Clan and things of that nature. And they sparked a lot of interest in the black community toward studying ancient history to promote the scientific and artistic and cultural achievements that black people made throughout antiquity and up until the present day. How the culture of today is kind of fed and informed by the culture of the past. And so based on that, and myself joining the Nation of the Gods and Earths in 1991, we started holding forums on campus. I was going to Purdue University at the time, for various scholars and lecturers and historians. And there's a group there that we had at Purdue University called NIA, and we invited people like Walter Williams and Asher Kwesi, some of the people that the university themselves wouldn't necessarily invite. They might mess around and get a Naeem Akbar there every now and then, or they'll get a Karanga every year because of Kwanzaa, things of that nature. But some of the more, I would say, adventurous scholars, they wouldn't get them through. And because of our efforts, they started bringing more of those, sponsored by the university, their honorarium and everything. We had Dr. Ben up there in the late 1990s, and I had a good dialogue with him. We had Ivan Herdimer. These are people that they would have never thought to bring through the black culture. And I noticed the dialogue about religion that had the same sensitivity as myself in terms of you can't promote religion, or you can't promote ideas of life sciences in the way that will continuously keep people in the dark, or keep them in a state where they feel like everything is mysterious. In order for you to understand the things that our ancestors are talking about, maybe you should try to understand what they're actually saying in their own language, especially the ancient Egyptian stuff. We had the books in our library. We had Budge's books with the quote-unquote Book of the Dead in his dictionaries, and some of the Piankov books on some of the translations of the pyramid texts and things of that nature. And you see all this God stuff. And for a 5%er like me, on the surface, that will get one of us excited because we're like, oh, see, they talk about gods back then, not knowing they were talking about a specific idea. They wasn't talking about just people. They was talking about various elements that people in society and life deal with. And so in that respect, they're not talking about this concept of gods. They're talking about forces of nature, and elements that comprise forces of nature, how the universe works. Just like somebody that's in the nation will talk about mathematics. That was the similar theme that they were talking about in that society. And so I started going to meetings like ASCAC meetings when I moved down here to North Carolina in the early 2000s. I started going to ASCAC, the local meetings, and some of the national conventions. I know Brother Asar and Hotep and Brother Bonacci remembers hanging out in Taseti in the Yahoo groups. And besides those activities and various other live lectures, that started giving me more exposure to Nile Valley culture. And I started to see the parallels in what is in Nile Valley culture and what it is that we teach in our nation in terms of a black man being symbolic to the sun, of a black woman being a throne or a home, of this veneration of knowledge and order, mathematics, the whole concept of Tep Hesed, the head of the count, or the head of mathematics, or supreme mathematics. And so, and in some respects to some of the names that were given to some of the netcher in their meetings, not just having a name and having it sound like something, but it has a meaning. You know, most of the names and words there are based on some type of action or some type of description. And to me, that was mathematical. So I started getting more and more into it. And with dialoguing with Bonacci, I finally dug in and started taking a class with him. He presented the opportunity for distance learning. And we had gone through that for dang near three years. And then he had handed most of those original students off to Kemetic and started reinforcing study there with Kemetic also long distance learning. And I say that to say, you know, it is better to sit down and have a dialogue, but if you can hear each other's voice and if you can present to each other your ideas, both in audio and in writing, then you could develop an honest and robust curriculum in studying Medu Neter, in studying language. And so where I'm at today because of them also interacting with Asar Imhotep and bouncing ideas off of him. And we don't necessarily agree a lot of times. You know, we kind of go at it on various ideas, but going at it on those ideas in a constructive way allows us to strengthen our research and our positions and maybe even modify our positions in some respects and how to present the ideas that are there and how they're connected to black culture. So that's what I got to say about that.
All right. Appreciate your insights. We have two new members, two new panelists that have joined us. I see that Brother Sanjetti has joined us. And via the phone, we have Brother Reggie. And, you know, quickly, Brother Sanjetti, introduce yourself. We can't hear you. If you're talking, we can't hear you. Testing. No, we can't hear you, brother.
Yeah, his volume is very low.
I can't hear him at all. Well, while he works on the his volume, I'm gonna introduce via phone Brother Reggie. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can the listeners hear me?
Hold on one second. I'm gonna see if the group can hear you.
Yes, I can hear.
Can you hear him well?
Okay, wonderful. Okay.
I can hear.
Go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Brother Reggie. How I got started, roughly in 1984, I joined the Department of Black Studies at City College as a student. I did that for during that time period, ASCAP was just beginning. I think at that time it was its first Kemetic conference. in the Eastern region, I became a sergeant of arms. As you know, in the Eastern region of ASCAC, I was very lively. Dr. Ben was still active as a scholar. And so, you know, roughly every Saturday, every Sunday, I got a chance to listen and speak with our Dr. Yosef Ben Jokanan, but also with the larger Association for Aesthetic Cross-African Civilization movement. And by about 1989, 1990, I think Dr. Kemetic had come to New York, and she taught the first Medu Neter course in New York. So I was a part of that. I wasn't a good student at all. It was kind of difficult, and she was very expensive. And it was one of her first teaching courses in New York. I got involved in the Medu Neter because of ASCAP. I work in the Association for Aesthetic Cross-African Civilization. 1987, we adopted a book with Kemetic. By that time, I didn't really understand the Medu Neter, and everything was kind of it didn't make sense. So one of the things that I was concerned about is how can I learn Medu Neter better? How can I teach it? As most of you recently know, I just did an online course on Medu TV for teaching Medu Neter. I got good response. Maybe I know that at least there's 50 to 100 people that are actively using my work to start Medu Neter. I didn't do Run Jane, see Sally walk type stuff. I got them right into the pyramid text, not the pyramid text, but the Shabaka stone, and I got them into some of the Parrot Mharu. My grade in the Medu Neter, I can say personally, I can still, as far as grammar and stuff like that, I can still say that I'm pretty medium. So I'm not going to say that I'm advanced. But I've done some great work. I've done a great paper called Primary Evidence that Ancient Egyptians came from Inner Africa, which took me to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in the Holies of Holies, which is the library. And to kick Forquet was one of the original translators of the Stela of Yabu. And in the Stela, it says that our ancestors come from Inner Africa. And I needed that, and I needed to see the Medu Neter of that. That was important because that's sure Dr. Ben's famous quote, we come from the foothills of the mountains of the moon, where God happens dwell, where he said it was in Nefer papyrus. I talked to him many times. It definitely was not in the Nefer papyrus. So that defeated his great scholarship. So as a student, I went down the script that's closest to that. Medu Neter is important to us today is because it's more than a design word. It's actually doing quantum physics. Medu Neter is actually a weapon. Medu Neter gets you to think differently, gets you to see the world differently, and it gets you to see the world as the original humans, the Remet. That is what the name. They're not Kemites. The people call themselves the Remet, right? The humans, the species of humanity. Without the Medu Neter, we cannot see our glory. We can't understand how to problem solve. We need to be able to think differently. And again, Medu Neter takes us to quantum physics. If you look at the Kemetic, the 8, the primary 8. Amen, Nomenet, Nunet, Kekeke, hey, hey, hey. Maybe by coincidence, it works out to be but it is those 8 that created the light, that created life, right? That waves combined, it created the Big Bang Theory. Well, the Europeans have always been frightened of this knowledge. It's been something that they needed to hold for themselves because they thought it was a weapon. Ultimately, it turned out to be a weapon because it created quantum physics. So, the quantum world, you can see through the Medu Neter. Many of us see, many people like to see the Medu Neter or call Egyptian, or what they call the Egyptian of information. There's a whole bunch of gods. They're not gods. It's a scientific language of classifying what they observe in a scientific way. So netchers are not gods. Netchers are classifications of their world. So I'll stop for now and just listen and add on if you like.
I'd appreciate it. And I know I don't know how long we have you, because I know you're out there with Dr. Leonard Jeffries and Dr. Rosalind Jeffries as they're celebrating their anniversary. How long have they been married?
This is their 50th anniversary. Wait 1 second. You can just stop the tape. Well, we can cut it off. It's her computer. That was Dr. Jeffries. 1 second, Dr. J.
Yeah.
What? Yeah, almost. Dr. Jeffries. This is the largest family on the telephone conference. It's with Darcy himself. Okay. My gosh, many thanks. I'm glad that you're connected with my son, Reginald Mabry, in a serious way. We are all growing together. So he has put together a fantastic presentation that we're looking at now, but we're going to have to end the presentation and get in with the celebration. And so we'll be starting the drumming and whatnot. So, but stay the course. Reggie's been a serious warrior and a scholar. So he's a holy hell, by the way. Okay, very good. Okay, all right. So that was Dr. Jeffries taking out time from his busy day, his own wedding anniversary, to say peace to the family.
All right.
Fair.
You know,
and that's how close we are. That's how close we are. We are not separated from our elders. We're not separated from the larger African movement. We are in constant contact. How can I say, we act as African.
All right, most definitely. I appreciate your insights. I'm gonna put the phone near the speaker so you can hear, and then I'm gonna get to the other panels, and then we'll get deep into this conversation.
Sure.
All right. So, Brother Sanjetti, is your mic working yet? Brother Sanjetti, can you hear? But we still can't hear your mic. I heard you tapping it earlier, so I don't know what you was doing. You on the phone?
He's on his phone.
Okay. Do you want to call in? There should be a chat feature. Just write. If you are on your computer and you can chat in, what you want to do, we'll try to make it happen. But in the meantime, we didn't get to Brother Uwajin. You there? Still?
See, I'm still here.
Peace. Let us know a little bit of how you got introduced into the Medu Neter and why you continue to study it.
Okay. Yeah, I started to explain, but Brother Bonachi said something that fits in with my motivation, and for a long time, I've been studying ancient Egypt, for a very long time, and my study of ancient Egypt started out pretty much like the normal fascination, because it's so commercialized. It's just so fascinating, so mysterious, and they have a lot of documentaries and specials on it. So I did what I could to get my hands on anything I could about ancient Egypt. And what I started to see was that different scholars or authors were saying different things, and then it was a lot of speculation, a lot of opinions, and that just didn't sit right with me. So I wanted to figure out a way to be able to tell, what is the accuracy, how can I discern fact from fiction based on what I'm seeing, what I'm reading. And I noticed that a lot of people that give commentary about ancient Egypt, it's rare that you'll see that they'll come from primary documentation and with the language. They'll just talk about Egypt, but not really dig in from a primary standpoint. So I noticed that also motivated me to get into the language. And like I said, I started studying Abrahamic religions. I'm a former member of an organization called the Nubians, and while a member of the Nubian organization, one of our focus was on Abrahamic or Semitic cultures, but also parallel to that was a focus on ancient Egypt. And there was a development or creation of the language for the organization called Nuwapic, and it started off as a Semitic or an Arabic language, but then it started to take on the characteristics of, or being, I should say, being advertised as an ancient Egyptian language. And me, I have a fascination with languages, period. I've always had a desire to learn languages. I took Spanish in school and did very well with that, picked up on it very fast. And also I'm a computer programmer, so I went to the University of Maryland for computer science. And in computer science, computer language, it's a language. People don't look at it as a language, even though you don't speak it, but it's actually a language. You have to learn grammar, syntax, and so on and so forth. So with that kind of background, and being taught about the Abrahamic religions, and being taught this language that's supposed to be the ancient Egyptian language, it caused me to look further into it, because I still couldn't understand what I was reading on the walls. I couldn't, I'm looking at the pictures, the beautiful artwork and everything, and people talking so much, giving glory to ancient Egypt, but I couldn't understand anything. So that motivated me to learn the language. And like I said, fast forwarding, I started learning on my own. I grabbed every grammar book from Gardner to Hotch to Budge. Who else? Allen, James P. Allen. Started teaching myself, and then I came across Dr. Raketi Amin and took her class. And like I said, she offered a very professional and structured way of learning it, as opposed to how I was learning on my own. So I was basically introduced to a more structured, orderly way of learning, and I picked up on it pretty quickly. And then from there, I continued to teach myself, and I started teaching others. I've been teaching others for about 3 years now, and currently I'm working on a beginner's book based on my experiences and what I've been taught from the books I've read, self-taught, and then Dr. Raketi Amin's course. And that would include Dr. Raketi Amin, Unkmi Ra. I don't think anybody mentioned him, but Unkmi Ra has an excellent grammar that's out, and it's yeah, matter of fact, you got it right there. And it's unfortunate that it's out of print, but I was fortunate enough to have a copy, and I've taken my cues from his work as well. So basically, I've taken my experience and my learning from those teachers, and I'm currently working on a beginner's book as well. So that's been my motivation on why I've gotten into it. Now, as a result of that, I am able to see, I am able to let the ancestors speak, so to speak. I'm able to see what the ancestors say themselves, and not rely on other authors, because I think a lot of people are preoccupied with well, there's people preoccupied with whether or not the glyphs have been properly deciphered. I think we probably get into that, or relying on European scholarship. So in me studying, I found myself depending less and less on, or blindly or indiscriminately relying on European scholarship, and also I'm able to confirm and see that the glyphs from previous scholarship, is pretty accurate. and I'm able to see what's wrong and what's right with that. So those are some of the things that how I got motivated and what I'm able to accomplish now. Don't want to get too long with this. So there's a lot more. You know, I could stay here for days and probably tell our stories, but that's pretty much in summary.
All right, I appreciate it. I think we've pretty much went through everyone except myself. So all I'll say is that for me, um, you know, like many of the people who have spoken on this panel in terms of their introduction, and for the record, you know, even though we're having volume problems with Brother Sanjetti, he also mentions in the chat that he too was a Nuwapian in the 90s, and this is how he got introduced to it. And you know, and one of his major teachers was Brother Ankh Mirah, who actually whose book he was well, he was holding up earlier, whose book you had mentioned. But like y'all, I didn't go through, you know, Nation of Gods or the Nuwapian group, but I was initially in the 90s a Hebrew Israelite. And I was a Hebrew Israelite under the camp of, which was known then as the Israeli Church of Universal Practical Knowledge. It is now known as ISUPK, which is the Israeli School of Universal Practical Knowledge out of New York. And when I went into college and started reading more material of just different cultures around the world and history, and started developing a rigor for my studies, I abandoned the Hebrew Israelite school and, you know, continued my studies, and I was noticing that everything kind of fell back on Africa. And so everything that we was taught in the Hebrew schools, I'm finding the exact opposite through my studies as it regards the knowledge of Africa, African culture, and things of that nature. And so in 2002, already at this time, I already had, you know, a good introduction into, you know, ancient Egypt, you know, one by the African American Studies program at the University of Houston. And like, well, I should take it back even further to the brothers of Alpha Phi Alpha at the University of, or Texas State University in San Marcos, Texas. And then when I went to the University of Houston, of course, further studies with the African American Studies program that was there. And when I first moved to Houston, I was introduced to this group called the Taseti African Historical Society. And so these were individuals who had, over the years, gotten their start with Dr. Ben. And so they used to host these classes and bring in speakers like Dr. Ben and others, Ashra Kwesi and you know, John G. Jackson and all this other kind of stuff, you know, in Houston. And so the you know, I attended, you know, many of their seminars, got to know the people who were in the organization itself, and you know, they got me started, you know, with, you know, a serious study of ancient Egypt. And of course, they started with a lot of the words. You know, they didn't really teach the grammar at first. They was just dealing with words and you know, reading the basics of the script. And so, you know, at this time, this is when the whole debate of, you know, does the word Kemet apply to black land or black people, you know, was kind of really at its height. You know, in the early was actually in the mid 90s, but you know, it was spill over into the early 2000s. And so it was because of that, I had my doubts on that it meant black people back in 2001. And one of my professors, Dr. James Conyers, he said, well, this is what I want you to do. I want you to write a paper on why you think that Kemet does not refer to black people, and I want you to present this at a conference that we're hosting at the University of Houston in a number of months. And so at this conference, it's nothing but PhDs, and people working on their PhDs, you know, in Africana studies, linguistics, languages, all this other kind of stuff. So, you know, he kind of threw me to the wolves. And so, you know, I wrote the paper, I went to the conference, and I presented my information. And, you know, they were like, well, you have some ideas, but you need to work on this. You know, I think you need to study this more, you need to study this more. You need to learn more about the glyphs. When you study the glyphs, then you'll be able to tell us more about, you know, why you feel this way or not. And so at that conference, I met Dr. Mario Beatty. And for those who know Dr. Mario Beatty, he's now the current head of ASCAC. And, you know, he's a student of Obinga. And so after talking with him, you know, he gave me Obinga's number. At this time, Dr. Obinga was still teaching at San Francisco State University. And so I had a number of conversations with Obinga. And so he reaffirmed that I needed to study the script. And so it is trying to answer the meaning of Kemet that I had to study the script more seriously. And so that's how I got introduced, of course, to the basic grammars, but of Unc Mira. I have like 2 video clips on YouTube of him teaching, you know, the Medu Neter in Houston. And, you know, it just kind of went from there. But I didn't stop there, because the more and more I got into the script, the more and more I realized that I had to study linguistics as well. And so, you know, my approach to the study of the hieroglyphs is not only from the standpoint of the glyphs itself, but the actual study of language and how it expresses itself psychologically through the glyphs. And so that has really kind of compelled my research, you know, from that point on. And so, you know, I don't even know how many years that is. I guess that's around, you know, 14 years in the study of this in various capacities. And so, with that said, Brother Bonacci, you know, what have you learned? You know, what are the basics of the scripts that we are all to understand, and what have you learned as a result of your study, you know, of the script in terms of the larger African context?
Well, everything that everyone has said really answers that. And that is that, like, I've heard Allah said, you just said it, and that is that, like, the Medu Neter changes the way that you look at the world. It's a very instructive language. The writing of it is instructive. The learning of it is definitely a discipline in precise thinking, and the concepts involved in it gives you other access, or gives you other ways of looking at the world. The Medu Neter represents a world construct, so that the study of the languages, as already has been said, it opens you up to another way of looking at the world. More importantly, another way of, or it would be more accurate to say that it presents another way of conceptualizing the world. And this is one of the most important things I think that people who only speak one language miss. And that is that, like, language, you know, opens up another way that the mind can organize ideas. There are certain ideas in African languages that we can't find, you know, replicated in European languages. And I think that we need to draw more of our understanding of the world based upon an African worldview. And in that way, I found the Medu Neter language, along with West African systems, to be invaluable. I just can't impress how much or how important it was learning Yoruba at the same time that I studied, you know, the glyphs. There are certain philosophical nuances that you get from the African languages that you just cannot get through the European languages. So I found that the more I've learned African spiritual systems, it has opened up the glyphs because they're basically one and the same thing. But as I said earlier, you know, I've heard every scholar, or I should say, I've heard all of us just about say the same thing. One thing that I have come to see, almost every time a black person learns this language, they bring out nuances and they see things that the Europeans, from years of studying, that they just don't see. And I think this is one way that, or this is one thing that makes it invaluable, that we get more African people studying the Medu Neter. It's a whole aspect of the language that hasn't been opened up. And we are the only ones who can open up that aspect of the language. And like I say, every African American or that I know of who have started to study the Medu Neter language, they see nuances and bring out certain things that, you know, the Europeans just cannot access.
Exactly. This is one of the reasons why, you know, I study the languages, the African languages, so heavily. And I'm gonna present this, and then I want to get one of y'all's opinion on what I'm saying. Is that, you know, when we talk about these different schools of thought that has developed over the years as it regards the study of the Egyptian language, whether we're talking about the Germanic school of like Ermin and Grappal, whether we're talking about the Oriental school with, you know, Dr. James Henry Breasted, James P. Allen, and the like, you know what I'm saying, or the French school with Champollion, you know, there's a certain, you know, cultural presence that they bring, you know, to their study, and especially like those who are in the Near Eastern studies, you know, who come from the Abrahamic tradition and how they interpret the data that is, you know, presented in the hieroglyphs. But then, you know, one that is not brought to the forefront is the quote-unquote the African school. And the African school consists of individuals like, you know, Dr. Theophilo Wabinga, Dr. you know, Sheikh Kanti Diop, Dr. you know, Dr. Ben, who we mentioned earlier, and some others in the French-speaking world that many may not be familiar with, like Dr. Abubakar Musalam, or who?
The Kenyan scholars.
The Kenyan scholars?
Kenyans. The collagen.
Oh, yeah, Dr. Sambu.
Right.
Matter of fact, I just finished the interview, a Skype interview with Dr. Sambu, and I'll be uploading that either tomorrow or Tuesday on Facebook, where he's going to go in depth about the collagen language and the collagen culture of people and its relationship to ancient Egypt. But so, you know, Dr. Sambu, who we just mentioned, Dr. Muba Binge Bilolo, you know, Omen Ndiji, I should say, Oscar Pafuma. You know, there's a whole bunch of individuals who are dealing with this language and script in a very systematic and precise way. Dr. Mario Beatty, who you mentioned earlier, and they bring to the forefront a knowledge of the ancient Egyptian script that the Indo-Europeans have not been able to, primarily because they don't live that African experience and they don't speak the languages. And so they bring about a certain thing that, you know, others don't. Like, for instance, we mentioned Kipkoech Sambu. And, you know, their oral tradition, the collagen people, or the Mayut or the Minute people, their oral tradition names the place in Egypt where they came from. They came from a place they pronounce as To. And To is what we would say is Jedu in the ancient Egyptian script. That's in the Delta area. The collagen were a a military clan of ancient Egypt. And they talk about this concept of Ma'at. And one of the things that he brings about in his work that you don't read in any mainstream Egyptological literature is that Ma'at is also basically a life principle or a life energy that is passed on from father, to children, and is passed on through the male line. It's kind of a life spirit torch that goes from generation to generation. And everybody that is a part of someone's Mat is a part of a family. So there's an association between Mat and family. And when I upload the video, you'll get the details if you don't have his books. And so, these are the nuances that only the African school can bring. And so, this is why I encourage others to not only study, the what you can from the European school, but to make sure that you study from the African school, because the African school is going to bring about some information that the European school cannot provide, because they don't speak the language, they don't do the rituals, and they don't have the oral histories within their communities that these African schools have. And so we're going to try one more time with Brother Sanjeti, Ifatunde Fayemi. If you could if you can speak. Still can't hear you, brother. You got to sign language your speech, and we'll have somebody interpret. What you saying. But
nice and clear.
The Medu Neter sign language. He's about to introduce a whole nother script.
Oh, there is such a thing now. It's the Ankh or Dua. It's there. It just spoken on like that.
Hold on, let me bring in brother Reggie, real quick. Brother Reggie, you still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
All right. What is your experiences with studying under and at least knowing about and reading stuff from the African school versus the European school in terms of the ancient Egyptian script and culture?
Well, luckily when I first started out, I had Dr. Kemetic, and so I got a good basis from them. However, we still use Gardner, we use Faulkner, and we also use, of course, other insight. Correct pronunciation and direction of the topic is important. The thing with the Europeans is that the Europeans have the text. They actually have the primary data. We get access to it, and we get fragments of it, but they have the whole corpus. They have this temple. They have the Stele of Yabu. They have the stuff that's in 71. We get access. We get access to it, but unfortunately, sometimes that's not enough, because we get it in fragments. So one of the important things that you're doing is pulling us all together, so that maybe we could pool our resources, and so that we can at least have the text to bear. There are a lot of texts that we could potentially are searching for, because we are trying to reread this. So if you listen to reading Miriam Richard's stuff, when she was dealing with those of Imhotep and the now not inundating and wanting to understand, she actually said in that script, she said that Imhotep went to the mansion of the net in the Pearl Ark to lead the souls away, right, so that he can be guided by them. And then he came back and he said, and this is where our ancestors came. And no king has been greater than better. I read that in English, and it's so true. Where's the text for the Yebel? So again, that forced me to go into museum of art, right? Into its holies of holies. And in every museum, there's usually a library. People don't understand because the library substantiates the collection of the museum. So the actual treasure of a museum is not what's on the floor. It's usually the library. I don't talk too much about the Europeans, except for they're instructive because they have the text, and that they have had the 150 years of the Medu Neter of creating institutions and transcribing most of the text. Luckily, there's still things coming out of the ground that we could that's important, but some things that's coming out of the ground is not important, right? Let me give you an example of something that was important that people overlooked, right? People talk about the Town M. Herald, and they talk about Annie. They're reading it from what Woods to get put together as a collection of different scripts. But it becomes Annie. But don't you understand that the more important Town M. Herald is the Mount Hefley, where there was a Nubian prince who was the king's fanbearer, his bodyguard. He was 21 years old. He obviously died protecting the pharaoh, and they buried him with a Kemetic. But this Kemetic has Medu being weighed against his ib instead of the federal line. Then we further that this particular Kemetic is the most famous when it comes to Egypt. It's like the what do you call it, the Black Madonna? Well, this Kemetic shows a Kushite or Nubian inside the Kemetic. He's not shown as a typical kind of like drawing, the classical drawing that everybody says, like, that they could just replace a name with. No, they draw him in his real person. I find that these treasures the Europeans have, but they're not gonna give it to us. Budge, he in one of his book, Cut, he shows that Gosor is a Twa. He shows the image. They don't show these things. So the importance for us is to I appreciate you pulling this all together, talking about these stories so we can make it real for our next generation and make it better for ourselves. We are maybe this kind of like the second generation of those. I was around when Malala Karenga didn't know the Medu Neter. Jacob Carruthers really didn't. It seemed like Dr. Wikediame was the ghostwriter. She was so important. But then after that, you have definitely Dr. Mario Pidi taking the charge, and of course, if you're lucky, still have Dr. Diaspora Benga. We now have enough Africans that we don't really have to talk about the Europeans no more. We really don't have to talk about them. All we have to do is just get the text. And I'm not saying this stuff is the work is easy. Again, I'm a medium. I think most of you are actually better than Medu Neter than me. I just think I have a wider experience with, and I'm goal oriented. So just to close, my major work was primarily evidence in Egyptian cave from Africa. I am highly interested now in not Manetho, but who was Manetho's high priest? Forget Manetho. That's their linchpin. That's not ours. What we're concerned about is not Manetho, but Manetho's high priest. His name is Welsh Nefer. Welsh Nefer was 380 BC to 300 BC at the time of so-called Manetho, his Kemetic character. We now have his teacher, Welsh Nefer, and we have his pulpit. And they don't say the things that Manetho says. Manetho would have had to get permission. So do you understand how we are able to rewrite the story now of Manetho? solve these problems. You can solve the problem from quantum physics.
Yeah.
You can solve that with the Medu Neter. It's not being spooky. I'm saying this to y'all. The brain was not important to the ancient Egyptians because it was just an instrument of the heart. The heart is made by the feather of truth. Why? Because the heart is your quantum energy. Your quantum energy has to be lighter than the feather of mind, not your brain. Your brain is just a sensory. So then you understand that it's your brain that communicates, it's your heart that communicates with every part of your body, not the brain. Not the brain. The ancient people of Kemet understood this and then at a pinpoint by putting the brain and throwing it away. And basing their, and the last point I want to say, maybe you'll bring me back, is George St. James is basically the father of this work. His stolen legacy, though none of it is in the Medu Neter, gave us these 10 virtues: control of thought, control of action, steadfastness, perfect identity, with high ideas, evidence of mission, call of spiritual order, freedom from resentment, based in the teacher, faith, the only learning, ability to dependent by initiation. That's how we were trained. Why? Because Dr. Ben trained us. Dr. Ben trained us. My biggest thing was, I can't go to Egypt and find these 10 virtues. Where are they? Do you know? I have found them? I have found them right in front of us. There are things like Sia, Hu, Heka, Mat, Gilma, Sahu, Asor, Sejum, and Ma. Right? Now those 10 things I can find in lots of texts. And I can see them a major part of the corpus and things that we have to master. So I'll end there and I'll listen further, for other people's comments and insights and thoughts.
All right. I appreciate that. I'm going to put you near the speaker. For everyone else, were y'all able to hear him clearly? I guess y'all have to unmute your mics.
To you.
Yeah.
I listen to the brother.
All right.
I just have one point or one question of clarification.
All right.
He mentioned Baba Jedi Shamsu Heru, a.k.a. Jacob Carruthers' level of literacy in Medu Neter and compared it to Riketi Amen's. Are you saying that Jacob Carruthers didn't have a literacy at the time in Medu Neter, or that he didn't demonstrate it, or was I hearing this wrong?
No, I'm saying that Dr. Jacob Carruthers, who is a teacher of mine, who is my first president of ASCAT, was a great scholar, but he was guided. Dr. Riketi Amen, she had got a PhD from the Oriental Institute of Chicago. I don't know if they're probably the first African woman who got a PhD in linguistics from the Oriental Institute of Chicago. I know that when they wrote the Hosea was almost all in English, and it was basically I always get in trouble, but it's basically kind of like a poetic form of Miriam Litch's ancient Egyptian literature. So I can't. Yeah.
What I do want to say is, Riketi Amen is a, how do you say it, protege, a student of Jacob Carruthers. So if he didn't have any formal training in Medu Neter, he did have some knowledge to influence Riketi Amen to study it in a formal way, which means he had some knowledge of it. He was one of the first people I know of.
Can I step in? Can I explain this?
Okay, go ahead, Benochi.
Can I explain the situation? Okay. Amen Jones was a member of the Kemetic Institute. And at the time, she could not translate herself. It was through the encouragement of Jacob Carruthers that she go to the Kemetic Institute, that she go to the University of Chicago to learn how to translate so that she could come back and share that information with those at the Kemetic Institute. Crothers also, on his own, went to Senegal, and he met with Joe, and he received encouragement from Joe to study the Medu Neter. When he comes back, this is when all of this out of Chicago starts to happen. He encourages Richetti to go to the Kemetic Institute. Now, it's true that he is not trained like she is, but all the work in his books were did by him. He didn't consider himself to be a teacher of the Medu Neter language, even though he studied it himself. He put that job on Richetti. Richetti, when she first started teaching, her job was to go to the country and teach various cities, you know, the Medu Neter language. Unfortunately, the furthest she made it was to New York. When she went to New York, she met her husband, she got married, and she wound up staying there, right? Now, through all of this time period, I was one of her students, and I watched this transition. You know, I watched all of this happen. So, you know, yes, Jacob Crother is not formally trained in any institution, but Jacob Crothers was one of my foremost scholars in this, and we could take a lot in terms of our perspective and how to study and what to study in the Medu Neter language from him.
I was just making the point about, and I think that you filled in a lot of information properly, but of course, you know, I was, of course, there in from 1984, 85, and 86. I'm not taking anything away from my former president, my ancestor, others, right? But the technical skills of the Medu Neter, Sister Richetti was the best resource. Dr. Jacob Carruthers was very, very insightful. His analysis of bringing the Kemetic was an incredible piece of work. Sometimes you could be a technical person, but you're not thinking a certain way. Dr. Jacob Carruthers was certainly thinking intellectual warfare, right? This was a weapon that African people needed to acquire, and he had deep insight. So I'm not taking away from it. I'm just saying, at the same time, Dr. Malana Karenga was there. Now, Dr. Malana Karenga is a great Medu Neter student, a great Medu Neter teacher, a great Medu Neter thinker. At that time, he was learning just like everyone else, but he's a great mind. So what I'm just trying to do is, because I'm 49 and I've been here, I'm just trying to say how far we've come. We can disagree on some minor points, but the fact of the matter is that through people's work like Dr. Jacob Carruthers connecting us with Sheka Antajia for bringing that line, because the other line was, I'm in New York, Dr. Ben owned ancient Egypt, but he had a different style of teaching. He didn't necessarily teach the Medu Neter, but he had an incredible memory of the glyphs, and he had access to some translations and stuff that we did not have.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to.
So these are just some points for people. I'm just telling you from the point of view that I was there, not taking away, but just adding that now we are now of age that they were almost when this work began, and this work just began for us really 30 years ago.
Yeah.
I think what he's saying is fundamentally that he was involved at the beginning stages of ASCAT. And so this, you know, the beginning stages of this serious collective study of the Medu Neter with a lot of our, who we consider now top scholars, who were really just in the beginning stages of this teaching, with the most formal being with Dr. Richetti. and then her kind of really, setting the blueprint, for everyone else in the Kemetic Institute. So I don't think he's trying to take anything away. It's just as he said, he's showing the progression. And so now what I think he's saying in the latter part is that, we are within that range in terms of age, and are setting, I guess the base, the next step or next, in the ladder, for the next coming generations, for the advancement of the study of Medu Neter in the same way that they were, in the 80s. So am I correct in that, brother?
Yeah, I think so. Thanks for your mind balancing it out.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's hard to. We should not be in the camp phase.
Yeah.
We should be able to articulate the history as we see it. I happen to be in New York in 84, 85, and 86, right?
Mm-hmm.
And went to Kemetic in 87 with ASCAC. I seen the dynamics between our elders, things that people don't like to see. Like Dr. Ben and Dr. Jacob Carruthers and Dr. Malala Karenga's having major tension.
Yeah.
To be in a room where one elder throws a fist at another elder, right? Over differences of who's going to be the big king of this new scholarship. And it was a change because Dr. Ben had they respected him as an elder. But the problem was Dr. Ben would not extend it to them. And here Dr. Jacob Carruthers and Dr. Malala Karenga and those people from the Kemetic Institute in Chicago, these people were eating this stuff up. But Dr. Ben still wanted to be the kind of grand master. And so there were lots of dynamics, and even in our generation now, there are lots of dynamics between. But so I'm asking you not to champion a person or a group. Just say that you're seeing it through my eyes because I deeply love Dr. Jacob Carruthers, right?
Yeah.
I'm saying that these are people that I know. Dr. Ben, I deeply love, even though he can be a difficult person. A very difficult person, right? And Dr. Malala Karenga, he was almost forced out of ASCAC, but he was a brilliant mind, right? And then, I get into a lot of trouble because, I was in the family. But the point of it is, there are texts like the Melhepri text, which is a very, very important document. The Stela of the Abu is a very, very important document. Some of these, do you know, in the Stela of the Abu, even though it's in the Ptolemy period, it was written, but it came from an earlier time. Do you know that is almost the first occurrence when a deity or a netcher approached the man? And that story became the Moses story. I mean, I'm just talking about the quality. I'm just talking about the intimate relationship with God, that God comes and speaks to you. That story told in Kemet around the 3rd dynasty from a Nosut city about Canaan was this delicate story that possibly became the Moses story. Moses, you're a sacred ground. Take off your sandals. In the Stela of Yabu, it says, Canaan says that I'm your maker, I'm your fashioner. Be still, right? Mm-hmm. These are the things that we need for our babies. And they need to be able to see it. They need to see the text. They need to be able to feel it and understand that this was given to the African species.
All right.
Yeah, I wanted to.
I'm gonna say one thing, and I'm gonna bring it to you, brother Uwaju. If I extend an invitation for everyone on this panel, and probably get a few more individuals to write an article and or translate an original text and I put it together in a book, would y'all be willing to do it?
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a good idea.
I mean,
yes, I would consider it.
We could
Go ahead.
also, just go ahead.
Oh, I was saying yes, I would consider it. And then knowing that we have various perspectives on how we translate certain words. For instance, we had the discussion about netcher being force versus quote unquote God, or words like ak, where people default to the word spirit when it has a more precise meaning than that of something that's effective. Those sort of things. Being aware of those nuances when we proceed to translate various works, and also based on our personal perspectives.
I'm gonna put that together. I'm gonna put that together. I'm gonna send it to y'all, and let's say 2015. And I mean like a serious if we can find some of those rare texts, that we can translate each. Or just write an article about something, specific, and we include the original text. We get on the JSS and make, the hieroglyphs, and then we had the transliteration, and then our translation, and maybe some commentary afterwards. I think it'll be a good and beneficial book to, really kind of show that the new generation is here, and we're willing to tackle on some of the most difficult questions. But we kind of interrupted Brother Waju several times, so before you forget your point.
Well, no, I was just kind of coming off of the conversation, and I think that when most people get into Africana studies, whether it's just to study as just collection of data, or to actually engage it in a person's life, and it becomes a part of a person's life, one of the things people tend to do right off the start is to want to break away from European everything, anything European.
Yes.
So and I think that when we discuss the Medu Neter, learning the language and everything, I think some people are preoccupied or turned off when we trace our Cecilia or our chain link back to a European institution. So, going back to the original question that you asked, Osar, I think it's very important that the African school be brought to the forefront, because we now have scholars who are confirming what we have learned and taken away from the European institutions, to the point where we don't have to rely on it. And I think Brother Reggie made a good point that the European schools, whether it's the French, whether it's the German, or I forgot the other one, the different European schools, they're basically the holders of primary documentation. But once we get a hold of it, whether it's by face mail, pictures, or people traveling to the museums and actually getting good quality pictures of everything, we're good to go now. So I think that it's very important to bring these African scholars to the forefront, because their linguistic work, such as Jean-Claude Mboli, whose 2010 work is pretty much going to break it wide open for our generation and the generations to come, as far as linguistically, because with his work, we're actually able to use it as a foundation to actually revive the language as a speech community, because of his reconstructions and his linguistic work that he's done. So I'm saying that even though, like right now, even with what everybody said, Dr. Raketi Amin is the most polished scholar in terms of formal training out of the people that we mentioned, even though everybody else is excellent in their work.
Don't forget about Obenga.
Yes, and Dr. Theophile Obenga. Definitely can't forget about Dr. Theophile Obenga. But now Dr. Theophile Obenga is a little bit different, because he actually comes from the African a more direct connection to the African line, you know, so to speak, because he actually, you know, he speaks African language. He's from Africa, and so on and so forth. So I'm saying that to say, like, a person like Dr. Raketi Amin, who went to an institution and brought the formal, orderly, structured way of learning here, that may turn off a person because she did that. Now there's no excuse. Now we don't have to rely on that, because the African scholars are confirming what she's brought back. So now we have our own chain that's not dependent upon the European scholarship, only in the sense of because they're holders of the documentation. You know, everything's in the museums, everything is in their libraries. But once we get that, then we're good. And then once we formulate some type of resources to where we can do our own primary research as far as traveling and doing digs, just as I forgot the what's the brother's name that I can't believe I'm drawing a blank. They actually did doing a dig on Kuramun.
Oh, Anthony Browder.
Yeah, Browder, exactly. Anthony Browder basically is kind of breaking the ice in that regard. So, you know, we're in a time where we're focused on the wrong things. I think the so-called black conscious community, by focusing money and resources on rap battle style debates, we could be investing in our own research and digs and scholarship. You know, so those are the things that I just wanted to point out that kind of ties into the importance of the African school.
Yes. Excellent.
I agree.
Yeah, excellent.
Browder doing some great work, and he's sharing it with a lot of the scholars here that are actually doing the more serious study in Medu Neter. So, you know, some of the ones that we mentioned here are in direct communication with him on some of the images that even the mainstream Egyptologist schools do not have yet of some of the writing.
Exactly. Matter of fact, like you mentioned Dr. Raketi, but even Dr. Raketi, you know, she comes from the school that, you know, originated with Sheikh Anta Diop and Theophilo Obenga, and so they're still kind of traditional in the way that they teach, you know, Medu Neter. And so anything that they teach, it'll be found in basically the Erman Grandpa Waterbush, you know, James P. Allen, or the Gardner, you know, grammars, you know, or any other ones that, you know, we maybe feel is kind of the mainstream. But then there are Africans who are looking at and even questioning the nature of the interpretation of the glyphs themselves, and individuals that I like to mention, you know, along that camp, who still comes out of the Diop camp or the Senegal school, is, you know, people like Dr. Muba Bingay Bilolo. And so I'm holding up a text here that is written in Chiluba. And so you have to know the Chiluba language to read this book. Tuleshi Kapia in Dianga Mu ciKam. You know, it is basically the light and fire in, like, Dianga is another word for light and brightness. Mu ciKam of ciKam. I don't even know what this, Mishi Ya ciKam Mu Siena into. I forgot what Mishi means, but Mu Siena into is just the Into family and its relationship to the Bantu languages in terms of ancient Egyptian. But the primary focus that you see here is the interpretation of the glyphs from a Bantu Congo lens. And so this is a different level of scholarship as it regards the ancient Egyptian script. And so, like, I'm holding up another book. This one's written in French. It's edited by Dr. Muba Bingay Bilolo and Dr. Sylvain Colombo and Sapo. And this is towards, or I guess, the Renaissance of Negro Egyptian theology. essays in honor of Professor Bunwinyi Kweshi, who was a theologian out of the Congo. And, you know, you can see in this text, for those who are watching live, you know, like Dr. Bilolo has an article in here in which he's discussing the actual reading of what we're calling the determinatives. Yes. And he says that when he reads the determinatives, they actually are real words in his language. And so how we would read the word itself and then just leave the determinative class, he, doing some experimentation, says I can make real words that make sense in my language when we actually read the determinatives. And so if his research pans out, you know, more broadly, then this will be another level of scholarship which argues, for those of us who can read the script and knows that the so-called determinative classifiers are silent, that in many instances these were meant to be read and may have a grammar, you know, function. And if they have a grammar function, then it may, you know, it may speak to possible vowels or possible tone marks or something to this nature. But in other words, there are scholars out there who are not stopping with, you know, what we've learned simply in the Diop school, but is getting deeper, you know, into the script itself and bringing about, you know, new information. And so we mentioned earlier Dr. Kipkoech Sambu, and so I'm holding up his book here, the Collagen People's Egypt Origin, Legend Revisited, was Isis Assis, you know, where you'll learn, you know, firsthand, you know, a culture who has the ancient Egyptian survival characteristics in their living culture to this day. And, you know, the proof here and in this second book, which I'm holding up, the Missouri Legend Revisited, or the Missouri Legend Explored, a linguistic inquiry into the Collagen people's oral tradition of ancient Egyptian. You know, I think these two books, and he has a third one that is to be released probably in another 2 years, where he's talking about the pharaonic relationship, you know, as discussed by the, you know, saying the Collagen. And so it's these works that are just taking us to new plateaus in understanding. And we mentioned Jean-Claude Mboli earlier, you know, whose more controversial conclusion is that Coptic and ancient Egyptian, and Middle Egyptian are two separate languages from two separate branches of the Negro Egyptian language phylum. And so that's going to take a while for people to wrap around their head, you know. But there's other scholars that has kind of mentioned that, you know, in earlier times before Mboli. So if anyone has, you know, the Africans who wrote the Bible, Dr. Nana Bachi Darkwa, you know, he mentions the different languages in the script being written in different languages, and how because of the European limited understanding of Africa and not trying to associate ancient Egypt with Africa, that they missed these certain things, which is why, you know, certain things seem to be untranslatable, or it seems to be a repeat in certain dialects and certain things of that nature. And so, even though I think this work could have been improved a lot if he would have went directly to the hieroglyphs, yes, he brings about a good point that even Mboli, in a more rigorous fashion, reaffirms, you know. And so it is our job, you know, to continue and advance the conversation and not simply be stuck. If we understand that the Europeans do not have the cultural whereabout to properly interpret this African culture, then we need to be able to have that African lens, you know, clear, and have a clear understanding of African languages and African culture to go back and re-examine, you know, some of the major themes. As a matter of fact, even in my book, that's why I named it Aluja, you know, which is the Chiluba Bantu way of saying the word rouge, which you see at the top here, which is part of the word Saruj in the phrase Saruj Ta, restoring the world. Aluja means to go back and retrace one's steps and to repair that which has been broken. And so as a result of the colonial school, I'm arguing that we need to go back through an African lens and re-examine these major themes that the European school has presented as fact, which the African cultures, the surviving Egyptian ones, and the related ones could, allow us to be more precise in terms of our interpretations, in which we can get clarity and, in a better practical usage of these particular texts. And is Sunjeti, you still having problems with your volume?
He's been typing on the side. He's been putting some I don't know if we want to read it, but some good points that he's been pointing out on the side in the chat.
Am I open up the line because it just called this is mine and so I can help him out and I get off?
Would you? I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
Can Jerry call by phone? Am I using up the line that he would use? If he call by phone?
No, I mean I have three-way. I can have both of you on.
Okay, if he's not a problem, I just thought that you were just making some courtesy for me. But, okay.
All right, I'm gonna try to call you, Sunjeti, on three-way, and so you can chime in as best as you can.
Star.
Yeah.
I would also like to respond to the whole cultural perspective of translation and deriving meaning from what it is that we're translating in respect to this westernized view versus a more black classical civilization view.
All right.
So, you and I have had arguments before about, vocalization for some of the words, but to me, what is of utmost importance, besides vocalization, is deriving meaning that makes sense scientifically in to the essential nature mathematically of what is being communicated in terms of words. This whole notion that the Europeans have placed this sort of feudal language on top of Medu Neter, so that words such as Neb means quote unquote Lord, and Nebet means lady, and Nasut Bidi means king, and ignoring some of the more precise language of what some of these titles are used for. They're not used in a feudalistic way or in a way that sets up a lot of this autocracy that's promoted in European society of you own something or you're entitled because you have a name, you have a job. You're a Neb not because you're a lord, but you're responsible for some type of office or action, and that requires work. Unlike in European society where somebody can be called a lord and they're just given that title with no works behind it. It's just in name only. Or for the Nisubidi, the so-called pharaoh. One of his adjacent titles is Hem Ek, Lord's servant. Similar to the ideas that are promoted in society for what a public servant is supposed to be in terms of politics, but are often not lived out based on this whole notion of entitlement or name only, as opposed to putting some work behind it. People that are put up as a face or a representative, they're supposed to be doing work. They're not supposed to be handed off a whole bunch of gifts and treated in a special way that they don't have to do any work.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to also talk about this notion of what names mean, where they originate from the various adjectives and verbs.
Mm-hmm.
that make up these words, that correspond with the Nisbe adjectives, correspond with the infinitives, correspond with the participles, that show that you have a name or a word, or because you're doing something, or you have a description, not because it sounds like something. You see me? All right, peace.
All right. Now, what you just said, it just reminded me of, again, the importance of the African school. I was just at the ciKam Diop conference in October, and I've been corresponding with him for a number of years, but I just finally got to meet him this past October, and that is Dr. Kemetic out of London. If y'all familiar with him,
I am not.
He has, he's a linguist in Africana studies. He's in Africana studies, and he's also a linguist. He wrote back in the day, this article from Medu Neter to Ebonics. Which he was kind enough to give me while I was there. But he also gave me his presentation that he did. Matter of fact, me and him shared the same panel at the Diop conference. And the title of his article is called "The netcher, netcher, or Father of the God in Kemetic."
Mm-hmm.
And this is a researcher out of Guyana. And the thing that he notes in here is that for anybody who's studied African languages and African culture knows this, but he was able to demonstrate it in a more systematic way in terms of ancient Egypt, as far as the titles that the ancient Egyptians would have, and one of them being netcher, Father of the Gods, and how he was given, I forgot the exact example, but where there was somebody who was definitely younger than themselves, who he gave a title of Father, of the netchers. Now, how could this be? Well, if you know anything about African culture, the titles that we give, something in terms of a spirit or energy or just human beings is based on the quality of the relationship. So the title itself doesn't, it's like the problem with the European school is that they interpret it literally. But it's not a literal, like this person's the father of the gods. You can't be a father of the gods. It's the relationship, to each other. So like when you marry your sister in the ancient Egyptian context, in Africa, it's not about literally marrying your sister. It's the quality of the relationship that you two have. It's like brother and sister. And what's and the point I'm getting to, saying is besides that, in terms of pronunciation, is that when you study linguistics, you come across terms, like in any scientific field, you're always concerned with how do I eliminate error in my analysis, and what kinds of errors could come about in the study, of whatever particular phenomena I'm examining. And in linguistics, you have this phenomenon called synonymy. Not synonymy.
Paronymy?
Not paronymy. How can I lose it that damn quick?
Semantics.
Go ahead.
Semantics.
No. It's how can I forget it that fast? That's a darn shame. And so either way it goes, it leads to paronymy. In words that sound alike.
Homonym?
That's it. Oh gosh. Homonyms. And so a word that I say every day, and when I need to think of it, it just slips.
Yeah.
There are homonyms, and in ancient Egypt, you also have homographs, words that may not necessarily be homonyms, but they use the same graphemes to represent the word. So remember that ancient Egyptian does not, as we understand the language today, write out their vowels. And as a result, we have to use the same consonant. There's a series of words with the same consonant clusters, but are not the same, that are not pronounced in a living language. And so, as a result of that, the Egyptologists simply stick E to facilitate the correspondence. To facilitate the speaking, of the word, since it's kind of impossible to have a dialogue with just consonants, in human language. And so what we know about the so-called homographs, because we don't know if they're homonyms, is that when we examine these words in different languages, we understand that these are differently pronounced words, even though they have the same consonant clusters. And so this is why the study of the African languages is so important to trying to figure out how to pronounce the ancient Egyptian. And when I give examples, there's reasons for examining the vowels in the way that you do, because the vowels can influence the way that consonants are pronounced. For instance, if you notice in the ancient Egyptian language, what we transliterate as X, lowercase x, and uppercase S for the sh sound, those sounds interchange in the language. Now, if you don't know anything about palatalization, you would just ignore a simple fact that when a word is when a consonant is palatalized, that means it is followed by an I sound or an E. So in those words where the X, when we transliterate as X or capital S is transliterated, we can safely say that there is an I or an E sound behind it, because those are the sounds, the mid sounds, the mid-rounded vowels that cause palatalization in the velar consonants. And your velar consonants are like your G, K, H, stuff like that. And so when that turns into ch, sh, t, that's because of the I or the E sound. And so vowels make consonants behave in a certain way. And is understanding how vowels make consonants behave in a certain way, why we stress, that it's more than likely this pronunciation versus another pronunciation, given the range and the way that the sounds change in the ancient Egyptian language. And so, like when we talk about netcher, people talk about it's a power. Well, the African languages will agree to a certain extent, but the word netcher in the African languages is one of those words that are different words. It's a homograph. Not every netcher is the same. You should not interpret every instance of netcher as the same, because one instance of netcher just means the exalted. So like when you say netter in the collagen language, netator or netilil, it is one who is exhausted, one who is exalted, the one who was on high. The classifier determinative reinforces that interpretation when you look at, for instance, the heru bird on top of the standard, because it's trying to get into your mind the concept of elevation. Now there's another word, netcher, that means source, origin, and it's a word that's used for parent. So like when you see on my poster back here, Medu Neter, Ndela is a Chiluba, one of the Chiluba renderings of the word, so-called word netcher, and it means source, the origin of something. It's a different kind of meaning than what you would get in the Egyptological literature. But we can go systematically in these related African languages and tell the difference, in the nuances and the difference in vowels, because Ndela is going to be different than Ndeli. Ndeli are the children, but you would never call the parent Ndeli. You would call the parent Ndela. You would call God Ndela. God can never be in Deli, because in Deli are the created. But since God was never created, he can only be in Dela. And so vowels are very important, and it's only by studying these related languages do we get these subtle nuances that are reflected if somebody is mindful when looking at the so-called determinatives, which are classifiers. And so, just wanted to put that out. But before we continue, since we haven't heard the voice of Brother Sunjeti, I have him on the phone. So, Brother Sunjeti, you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
To you.
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, okay. I definitely agree that, we do have to look at the African context, which will help us better or more accurately interpret, the Kemetic concepts. Now, the Europeans, I think that they can pretty much hit it in a general ballpark of the meaning for the most part, so they're not wrong in a sense, but the accuracy is only going to come through the African context, and that's pretty much where I stand on that. So when we're reading Faulkner, Budge, Litcham, etc., and other translators that bring grammar, such as like Mark Collier, they're not wrong. It's just that they're not hitting the pinpoint that could be hit once the African philosophy is reinserted into our general comprehension. So in my own studies, I've constantly discovered that the accuracy will come with the African context. I know further back we did speak about the determinatives. I do think that the determinatives are classifiers and can be indicators for vocalization or pronunciation. And of course, vowels do help modify the meaning, because of course you do see that in even the Semitic languages. I gave an example on the side. I'm not sure if y'all were able to see it with the word netcher. God, and the netcher meaning axe. And when you actually look at the glyphs for netcher meaning divinity or power, you will have one determinative. And also, when you look at the word for axe, the netcher for axe, you have different determinative. Now, when you look at the Coptic form for both of these terms, of course, Nute for God, power, divinity. But then when it comes to axe in the Coptic, the netcher is vocalized as enter very differently. So even in the Coptic, we find indicators that the determinatives help to determine pronunciation or vocalization and meaning modifiers, therefore noun classifiers. Then to another point, when we spoke about like love, in a sense, where in poetry, I mentioned this on the side, in love poetry, you'll find men calling the women that they are in love with as sister, and vice versa. You'll have women calling the men that they are in love with as brother. All right. Now we can look in modern times today, because we do the same thing. All right. We'll walk down the street and say, "Yo, that's a fine sister right there." Okay. We know that the context is that this isn't a literal sister, but we're talking about, like relationship, in a sense, like even a racial relationship. Because, we won't really call like a white woman, "Oh, look at that sister," who use that for a black woman. I see on the slide here that elder brother Nachi needs to get in, so I'll just go ahead and pass the mic, and I'll continue on the next round.
All right. Yes. So, Brother Bonacci, I understand that you have to go in a little bit, and even before that, I just want to appreciate you coming on and sharing your insights, and hopefully this will encourage, more of us to get into the language. more seriously and more rigorously. So, before you depart, any departing words?
Well, I wasn't saying that so that I could speak. Really, I was very much interested in hearing everyone else, because there's a few folks on here I really haven't heard before. So I was just saying that to I have to leave, but I wasn't saying that so that someone else could stop talking. I was really interested in what I was hearing, so I didn't want you to stop.
But okay, even before that, just in case you have to dip out unexpectedly, you yourself are a teacher of the Medu Neter writing script and language, and so for those who want to, learn, especially in your area, how can they get in contact with you? Are you still teaching? I know when we spoke some time ago, you was going back to school, getting some things. I don't know if you still have time. What's going on?
I'm just getting back starting, and just like everyone else, after studying this language, I found that I needed a larger background in linguistics. So that's what I'm back in school doing. I'm getting a degree in linguistics. So my time is tight. I'm definitely jammed up. But what we're doing here, I just love this. This is definitely what we need. And any way that I can, is be of help, service, or anything, you have my email or my number, call me. Also, I will be starting another class next month at BB2 Mikasa. And I'll be sending out some advertisements starting Monday, or tomorrow, to everyone. So when you get this in your emails, I definitely appreciate if you pass it out. This is, I'm sure, as all of us know, learning this language is something that is a lifelong study. Once you get started, you will never stop. Yeah. So that's it. That's all I have to say.
I'm gonna make sure that I put your I'll at least do this. I'll put the link to the course, at least the past ones, and so that they know where to go directly. Right. When this records and is put on YouTube. So I'm gonna do that for everyone. So make sure that I have the information that if they want to know more about y'all teaching, because I think everybody here basically teaches Medu Neter, and I'll make sure that information is at the bottom so they can look at that at the bottom of the screen when they're reviewing it, for those who didn't watch live. But if you have to dip out silently, I understand, but I just wanted to make sure I got all that in.
Okay. In that case, I will add my address in.
Okay.
You can my email is bonotchim@aol.com, and I can be reached at in Detroit, Michigan. It's best to call area code 313-870-7351. And I have definitely enjoyed talking to the two brothers I really haven't met before, and hopefully next time I can have a little bit longer conversation. It's with it's both of you. I'm familiar. It's with everybody's work, and it's just I'm turned on by everything everybody's doing. I really appreciate you, brothers.
All right, I definitely appreciate you and your work and your tenure in the field. I've learned a lot, and we're just gonna keep it going.
Okay, well, everybody, I will have to get out of here. Shematep, and at the next meeting, just let me know, and I will be here.
All right, no problem, man.
Seba, Uncle Jocelyn.
Shematep.
What's up? And I know Brother Uwaja, he had to go soon too. So I mean, we've been on 2 hours. I didn't plan on going any more than 2.5 hours. So if anyone has to leave, just let us know, and we'll end it soon. But this is just a preliminary conversation. Maybe we can get into something more specific, and then all of us be able to give our insights on a particular script, a particular method of learning or whatnot, and you know, y'all just let me know, and you know, and I'll set it up. And but Brother Uwaji, you have something to say?
Yeah, I do have to leave in a second, and I just appreciate the coming together and doing this, and I'm in agreement with doing it on a regular basis. You know, whether it's every other week or every week that we can do this and kind of get used to everyone's ideas and things, because I think it's necessary for us to come to a consensus on quite a few things when we're trying to educate the more mass amount of people. I did want to say this on the subject of translations and things. I always look at translation as a science and an art, because you know there's no one-to-one translation when going from one language to another. And I think my background in computer programming has kind of drilled that into me, as far as how to you know, take one language and interface it with another. You have to have this common hub that actually translates the relationships. You know, words have relationships, so there's one to many. And in linguistics, they usually call that semantics, or the semantic scope. And I think that a lot of us, we need to get more familiar with semantics so that we'll know, so that we won't have too much of a problem, and we'll be able to explain away, like when we say netcher means God. A lot of people may have a problem with that, but in semantically, we should be able to do the one to many and show the broader field of meaning, you know, based on the African context and stuff. So, and then lastly, I just want to say that I am working on a beginner's book, and I decided to do it because I was teaching a beginner's class, and instead of using just pieces of different information from everywhere, I felt that it's best to, you know, to come up with a textbook. You know, when you're teaching something, it's always good to come from a textbook or text source that everybody can have access to. So that's really what my book is, and I would love to get everyone on the panel's input in it before it actually goes to print. So I will be contacting everyone and giving you a copy to help me proofread, get your ideas and your feedback and critiques on it. And maybe possibly it could be a work that we all use, you know, as far as beginners. Now, it's not a grammar or anything extensive, but it's just a beginner's basic to bring people up to speed and actually allow people to even know if they want to pursue the language, because sometimes people get into it just out of a fascination and then they fall off. So what I've done, I've allowed people to kind of address that question within themselves. You know, is this something I really want to get into for further, or am I good? You know, if I just see this vulture bird, I know that's an A, I'm good. You know, a lot of people want to take it further than that. So, but that's pretty much it.
All right. I know we had Brother Reggie on for a long time. Are you good, or you have to leave? Huh?
No, it's Jenny right here. You gotta.
No, I have y'all both on. Y'all, it's a merge call, so he may have stepped out or he may have hung up. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But Brother Divine.
To you, I just have a couple of responses here.
All right, go ahead.
Yes, it is important to talk about the usage of words that have a similar or same phonetic spelling, but may have dissimilar meanings. But it's also important to talk about those words that do have the similar or same phonetic spelling, and although may have different determinants, show a parallel between terminologies that are in fact not as dissimilar as one would think. For instance, one of the words for woman, set or seat, and its correspondence to the term or concept of throne. How those are similar, it can be shown in context, especially one of the images that is popular in promoting what a throne is, with the picture of Aset with the child her, aka Haru, or Greek rendering Horus, on her lap, and showing that a woman is a throne for a child. So, discussing those ideas, and discussing when the context shows they're the same and when the context shows they're dissimilar. Also, on the question of netcher and the sensitivities of the various sensitivities of people based on their religious background or lack of or choice not to engage. It is also important to discuss some of the primary usages of the word netcher, not just this association with something that seems supernatural, but also the instances where people are given the title netcher. For instance, the Nesubidi, the so-called pharaoh, being called the Neter Nefer, and other titles that are given to different classes of netcher that show this one relationship with this so-called all-pervasive force that some call netcher, in instances where the Nesubidi, a man, is called netcher. And what that means in terms of the relationship of man and people and plants and animals and other objects in nature, their relationship on a philosophical level to nature. And some of the classes that speak on that relationship in terms of the origin of objects and things. So that's why I had to speak on there. I do some instruction in Medu Neter on a voluntary basis. I've done some classes here in the Atlanta area at Tassili's Raw Reality, which is in the 900 or the 1000 block, Ralph David Abernathy. My schedule has been tight now with more advanced work in my professional work, but I will try to go back into some volunteer instruction in beginning Medu Neter, perhaps this coming spring or summer. And I'll have my information out there also. And Dua, thank you to Sir Imhotep and the other panelists for coming on to build and add on this pertinent topic. Peace.
Most definitely. All right. Has Brother Reggie come back?
I don't hear anything.
I'm just going to assume that he's gone for the evening. I'm trying to get to this freaking Twitter page where I have this. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen real quick. I don't know what document I actually have this in. I don't feel like looking for it, but I did upload a screenshot of it online, and this is what I mean in terms of linguistics, because I get into these debates with people who try to argue about Egypt. I mean, Kemet being a it's just rooted in the word black, and so in the in your statement, and so I'm gonna go back to
the mirror.
Can y'all see the screen?
To you, yes.
Okay, so it's when we talk about the difference between homonymy and homographs. See, a true homonym is pronounced the same but it may be spelled the same, spelled differently. But a homograph is that they use the same graphemes to represent this, the same sounds. In this case, on this left column here, I have these words from the collagen language, and I have the consonant clusters that belong that these words make, and then of course their definitions in the third column. And so this is just an example here of why this happens. But I'm just showing a language that the people are that they've maintained, saying the language. And so when we see here on the left hand, words like kamama, kami, kamiu, kimai, kimaita, kimi, kimu, kimyo, kimoi, ya, ki. All of these words look like basically the same. Variation, same root. Look at the consonant cluster, like we see. But it's clear when we look over here on the right hand column, of course, but not only are they positioned, but there's some vowel which makes words. And so because we don't have the advanced vowel, words like so many people make arguments of the homograph. There's five exact homographs with certain pages. So almost be, but they're not. Let us know category. Also, again, there's not a language. That we understand what because without it, we'll make some very elementary mistakes when interpreting the words. And so this doesn't just limit itself to the ancient Egyptian language. Many world languages, especially historic languages, play off of similar sounding words. And it's those similar sounding words that give rise to paronymy. And so, the word for seat and the word for sister are totally separate words. They're not related in any way. But if there's a similarity in the way that the words sound, the ancients would create some kind of relationship. And so in linguistics, we call that phenomenon paronymy. But when the words sound exactly the same or very similarly and they create a relationship, we talk about a phenomenon called semantics. And semantics, one good example of semantics in the ancient Egyptian language is with the words, y'all will pronounce it aku or ak, which is a word for beneficial, which is a word for spirit, and which is a word for light and stars. These are four totally separate words, historically and linguistically. But the ancient Egyptians, because of this phenomenon of paronymy and semantics, creates a relationship with them. And you can go to many different African languages and the same semantics would be there. in terms of, for instance, when you die, there's already a word for the dead in the spirit of the ancestors called Aku. But there's also a word for star. And so in their mind, when you die and become an ancestor, you will also become a star. And this, in this same semantics, you will find in many different African languages, also using the same exact word. Matter of fact, if I anticipated this, I would find it. In this book here, the Zulu Thought Patterns and Symbolism by Alex Ivar Berglund. The word Aku is really not Aku. We don't know the vowels in Egypt, but it would be like Reku, Ruku. In the Bantu languages, it's Lungu. And here he talks about the Mulungu spirits that turn into Lungu stars. The word for sun is Ilangu or Ilanga. These are totally different words, but because they sound the same, the semantics phenomenon, they have, just like the ancient Egyptians using the exact same word, have created this association between light, stars, and ancestors because of the similar sounding, the similar sounding of the words. But this is ancient. Before there was a Zulu, before there was an ancient Egyptian, this phenomenon existed. And so even Jean-Claude Mboli talks about this. And so me and him have had many conversations as it regards the nature of semantics. And so me and him have shared notes. As a matter of fact, Dr. Lupe Oduyoye, I have his books somewhere around here. I like showing the books. He talks about this phenomenon as well. And so you have to understand these linguistic nuances which give rise to the social and conceptual, phenomena. And so they're not related. It may seem like there's some kind of relationship, but it's not. And so if you try to interpret a word based on another word, you will be mistaken. And that's not how you do it, because that leaves too much room for any old kind of interpretation. You need to have something that is more systematic, that you can demonstrate more conclusively to show a particular pattern, because every language has its semantics, and you have to discover the semantics of the language to understand how they use and map words, and map those words to phenomena themselves.
The only response I have to that is I don't think that all those terms are as dissimilar as you say. This is one of the points that you and I have disagreed on, to some extent. But I do understand being more precise in talking about the words that are actually, quote unquote, spelled the same, that are in fact different in meaning based on context of how they're used. To me, the context of the description of the roles of woman and the description of throne are such that they have a similar root in meaning in terms of a resting place for that which is born, for that which is nurtured by the state, or that which is nurtured by land, which also the word cedar set used for the word place gives that relationship of a woman or women to the land also. So I know this is up for debate and argument, but
it's really
we
not.
Also both present our arguments in that regard.
I would agree with you. It's really not, and I would agree with you. It's just that you have to. It's not enough to know what. You have to know why. And because if you don't know why, you can be right for all the wrong reasons. And your work doesn't have much scientific value at that point, because you can't establish a pattern. So for instance, like with the word for seat, there's a phenomenon in the Egyptian language where the so-called feminine T nominalizes verbs. The words for seat is a nominalized word for to sit, or to place down, or to place on top. That's the real root of the word for seat. When you add the suffix T to it, then it becomes a noun, an idea for seat. Now, the feminine, linguistically, they use for all types of conceptualizations. One for collectivity, one for bulk, and of course the feminine aspect of it. But this feminine, this collectivity is used in a different context. But there's a semantics in the ancient African languages and even Indo-European, where the same word for to sit or to stand is the same word for place. Because in the ancients' mind, they're thinking like in terms of like outer space. You know you're in outer space if you're floating in outer space because you have nowhere to stand. You have nowhere to sit. But you know you're on land, you know you're in a place because your foot is be able to plant itself. This is why the psychology of the glyphs is important. When you look at the word for boo, or the B sound, the leg, when it's a word for place, it has a single stroke behind it. And you know that the single stroke means that you to interpret it literally. So if the word for place has a single stroke behind the word for, the symbol for foot, we should technically, if we was to interpret it using the European school's analysis, as the word for foot. But it's the word for place. But it's in the African languages, the word for foot is the word for place because it's dealing with the concept of standing, to be able to stand on something, but also being able to sit on something. The psychology is the place that you're able to put something on. Just like with the word hotep. The word hotep, the sign for it is the loaf or so-called cake or whatnot sitting on top of the mat. Their idea was to focus on you placing something on top of the mat, because the word tep means to place, to put on top. And so when it comes time for resting, sitting and placing on top is the same it's the same logic. And so this is what you see in the glyphs. And so you have to understand why that phenomenon. So when they use, for instance, an idea of place and like a baby on a woman's lap, it's not because they have the same linguistic meaning. It's just that they have a similar conceptualization. But there may be totally the word for woman, like the word for synod. The word sin really is a word for two or double or partner. And so that's what they mean by brother. It's your other. It's your twin. And then the feminine part of it would just be the female part of it. And we know this because when we compare the same words in these African languages, that's the meaning. And so to have a double, to have a twin, is something totally different than to sit. They're totally different concepts, but they can relate them, in a certain way by what we call metaphoric extension.
I don't see the connection between Senet and Set here.
In Set?
Yeah, I think you gave an example for Senet, and then you tried to compare it to Set or Seat.
That's what I thought you said, Senet, earlier.
No, I said Set or Seat. ST.
I know. Yeah, with the S.T.
Yeah, I didn't say Senet.
I know, like for instance, like when you hear Dr. Ben's speeches, you'll hear him all the time talking about, the throne is the seat of a woman's lap. So that's what came to mind when you were talking about in terms of the woman, the female, in relationship to the seat.
I used the term earlier when talking about sister or woman, but I explicitly use the term set when making the comparison between throne and set woman, being the feminine of the participle for see, to sit or to perish or to rest. So see is man, S or C is man, and adding the T suffix to that participle makes it woman. So yeah, I wasn't comparing Sinet there, but I see what you're saying.
But yeah, even that, it would be totally separate words. So S just being the word for man, and it's Sa or Za, and even Ta and Da in other African languages. Matter of fact, what's his name? Dr. Obinga. I'm missing some of my books. In this text here, gives many examples of the cognates in the African languages in terms of the word Sa. I just have to find it. But that would be, but that would be totally separate words altogether.
I think about saying separate words, separate contexts, yes. Separate words, not so much.
No, it would be separate words because one is a verb and one is a noun. And so in this case, you would have, like, if Sa is a simple word for man, and adding the T suffix makes it feminine, it would not be the same as the word for the throne, because the word for throne derives from a word for to sit, to lower. They're not related conceptually at all, and so you would have a hard time convincing scholars on this matter. They may sound alike, and they may have the same graphemes, but they're totally separate words, even if the Egyptians tried to make some kind of relationship between them, just like with the Remech and the Remiet in the story in which Ra, who's also known as Remy, cries or sheds tears and creates humanity. This is an example of paronymy. Crying and tears have nothing to do with the word for human being, but because of the phenomenon of paronymy, they created this myth, in which Remy, Ra, Remiet, the tears, from Ra, created the Remech, the human beings. And so it's just like even in the Bible, for instance, this is paronymy in the Bible. When, matter of fact, they have Ra in the Bible because the word Ra in Hebrew means evil. And they use a pun when they want to talk about the ancient Egyptians and the sun god Ra as evil. They're playing because of the similarity in the words. But also in the word for Babel, where we get the word Babylon from. The word Babel in the actual Babylonian language is Ba'ab Ilu. It's the gates of God. Ilu being the same as Allah, Elo and Elohim or whatnot. And Ba'ab meaning the word for gates. That's what it means in Babylonian. But since they didn't have the word in their language, interpreted using their language. So they have a word similar in pronunciation that means to babble or to rattle. And so they created a whole myth about a tower being raised in the heavens, and then this is the reason why God, confounded the tongues, because they tried to reach, the heavens, and thus, they call it Babylon because this is the source of the origin where the babbling or the differentiations of the languages happen. That's called paronymy. And so this is the same thing that we see in ancient Egypt.
I'm going to disagree with you on the perception that C and set are not both participles based, active participles based on the irregular verb C, Z-I or S-I, which we know that most nouns that are out there are either forms of participles of verbs or forms of Nesby adjectives based on adjectives. So That's all I can say on that for right now.
I guess so. But again, it's just one of those situations where you have to go beyond the script, because learning the script is one thing. Learning linguistics is a totally different beast. And in linguistics, it helps to get at the heart of the nature of the language. And it's impossible to get an understanding of any language without studying related languages, because certain languages keep certain nuances and meanings that others don't, or keep certain grammatical features that others don't. And so that, like ancient Egyptian has a lot of fossilized features. For instance, in the word ma'at, matter of fact, I'll just share my screen here. This is what I shared at the DIOP conference. Okay. Let me go down. I should first say, again, can y'all see the screen?
To you, yes, I can see it.
Okay, I don't know how big it shows up.
It shows up at suitable size.
Okay, let me know if it still shows up. I'm gonna make it full screen, and I'm gonna see if it shows up that way from current slide.
Yes, it does. To you.
Okay, so you see here, as always, I'm always examining and re-examining the pronunciation of the glyphs, and so let me get this out of the way. In my presentation, I was dealing with, some phenomena. It was a paper in honor and dedication to Dr. Kimbwadini Fukiao. And so in this paper, I was talking about the god Ra and the goddess Ma'at as found in the Congo and articulated in Fukiao's work, even though he didn't know that these were the words, for these deities that are in his language, which he was describing in his cosmology. And so I had to start off the presentation with a thorough understanding of these two glyphs, because when you read the literature, they try to make it seem like these glyphs are vowels, and they're not vowels. And many linguists and many Egyptologists are now coming to the conclusion that these are not vowels, not interpret these as vowels in any way. So this glyph here, the arm glyph, I reconstructed to T, the Balon sound with an I behind it. And the vulture symbol here, as my interpretation of L, I'm going with Bowley on this one as a baseline R. Now, and here's some different works which, they have given their take on this, transliteration of the lowercase a. Now, in Saxon's work, he noted that this, possibly rock him or the body, same word. The boss is like they pronounce it old way. Ilega. Donde you don't have rainbow, fruit, Somali, boom, they lost these sounds that here. Nasalized here. Congo, justification, just like Congo, Buddha, act right, that person is Buddha, come right, you Buddha, act. So this particular study here demonstrates the borderline rectification and the nature of the that is fossilized in this. So understand, these are kinds of steps we have to analyze the word. So, this is how we know that word is straight and the word is totally word, but they sound the same. So the English gives you comparative, they same word. Just like the word base, really the word for good. So I use that, but but while we have to be, in our analysis, and why we can't take anything for granted. And so when we're saying rock, it's really rock or rigwe, as in one West African language pronounce it, rigwe. And because you say, most people say ra or ra'u, but it's rigwe. The u sound is a consonant. And but it's in lungu or ilonga, kalunga, in these various languages. And so, this is what the study allows us, to really get to the heart at, and why it's not enough simply to learn the script. You have to learn linguistics, which is why Brother Bonacci, said earlier, and he's been studying the glyphs for a very long time, since the 70s. And so, but he came to the realization that learning the glyphs is not enough. You have to learn linguistics, which is why basically everybody in the African school are Egyptologists and linguists, from Sheikh Anta Diop to Obinga to Bilolo to Alan Anselin to Oscar Perfume. Everybody, they all have certificates and degrees in linguistics and Egyptology, because you can't study the hieroglyphs without understanding linguistics and historical comparative languages, which help us to get at the root of these words. But it's already coming on 3 hours now, so I didn't plan on it for being this long.
The only thing I want to say is you were in the PowerPoint presentation. Your audio dropped, so I didn't hear most of the presentation.
Oh, I'm sorry. Dang.
I don't know where the disconnect is, but I'd be interested in taking up that discussion later.
Well, as I was saying during the presentation, I recorded my presentation from the Diop conference,
right?
But I just need to put the slides, up so the people, because the recording was on me, but not on the screen as I was presenting at the conference. So I'm just going to take the slides and then put them on the screen, so you'll see the whole presentation, from there, and then we can further that discussion. So hopefully, but that's the whole point of these, so we can have people who are engaged in this work, really, get beyond the Facebook and present this to a wider audience and see what kind of discussions we have in more private circles, on these questions. And so again, I appreciate everyone for coming through. Hopefully we can have these technical difficulties fixed. I was really hoping, I had it working one time, the call-in number, because they have an app here for people to call in, and
I tried calling in and couldn't get past the PIN number. It didn't do anything.
So I'll have to test this on another basis, or see if there's some other equivalent, for people to be able to call in. But so I don't have to hold the phone up, like this.
They have to call in first to the number, and then it will receive calls.
I'll have to test it, because I've always had difficulty with it. But one time when I didn't need it, when I had one of these Google Hangouts, it was appearing to be working. It connected and it stayed up, the whole conversation. I just, it was just more of a one-on-one between me and Nuwaja, so we didn't advertise the call for people to test it. But now when I started the program, it wouldn't connect at all. And so that's why Brother Reggie, because we intended Brother Reggie to call in with the number, but he had to call in on the phone. So and I wish I could have got some closing words from him, but I have to send him a private thank you, saying for joining the conversation. But thanks to again, Brother Sanjetti, if you have any last words, I'll let you have the last word, and then we'll end it.
Again, I think this was a good initial type of discussion. I agree. I pretty much agree with the linguistic part. So again, for the next go around, we can go into specifics a little bit more. I definitely appreciate Elder Brother Bonachi's presence in there, and I've discovered the same thing. Insofar as knowing the glyphs is not enough, because when you and I met Brother Asar, at that point I was very proficient in the glyphs. Yeah. But then I quickly discovered that you got to study the linguistics. So and I discovered that on my own. So it adds credence to the importance of doing such multi-faceted studies. When multiple people come to the same conclusion who are coming from different backgrounds. So definitely, appreciate Brother Divine coming in as well, because we know that he's very good with the glyphs. I've seen him do a lot of work with the grammar, especially as we find it in Alan's work and others. So I think that he's very strong in those areas. I just want to see my brother go more into the linguistics. I think that'll strengthen a good brother there. You know what I'm saying? So like I say, I definitely compliment Brother Divine, on his proficiency in technicalities of Egyptian. We just all have to expand. I have areas where I need to expand myself. So this is going to come from our exchanges, given that we come from different backgrounds. And so the more that we do this, the more that we come together and everyone that offer their different views, that are strengthened the whole plethora of our overall goal.
All right. And with that said, I thank everybody for listening live, and anybody who happens to be listening on the archive. Appreciate everyone who came on the panel. Again, all of these people I know personally, and I know their proficiency in the hieroglyphs, and you can ask any one of them any questions, and they'll be able to answer your questions in regards to this ancient script. So I hope everyone. We didn't really get on the practical applications of it, but maybe that's another conversation. But again, thank all of y'all. I appreciate y'all, and for everyone watching, we're about to end now. So thank y'all for listening. If y'all been listening for all 3 hours, thank you for soldiering in with us. And until next time, I say Hotep, peace, and blessings to everyone. So, we're signing off.
Medu Neter, Uncle Jocelyn.
Hotep.